Every summer for years, a man packed a cooler, loaded his wife and 2 young children into the car, and drove to a quiet wooded spot for a picnic. He would lay out a blanket, let the kids run in the grass a few feet away, and then, carefully, quietly, without ever explaining why, he would check that the ground beneath them hadn't been disturbed. Because buried there, under the same patch of earth his children played on, was a 16-year-old girl he had murdered. He lived 200 yards from her grave. He raised his family beside it. He brought his kids back to that exact spot every single summer to make sure nobody had found her. For 7 years, no one did. Not the police, not her parents, not the town that never stopped looking for her. This is the story of Carrie Lynn Nixon. In the summer of 1987, Ausable Forks, New York, was a town built on trust. Nestled at the edge of the Adirondack Mountains, it was a place where neighbors knew each other by name, where the rhythms of daily life felt steady and predictable, and where danger was something that happened somewhere else, never here, never to people like them. Carrie Lynn Nixon was 16 years old and as much a part of that town as the mountains surrounding it. An above-average student, an avid singer, an aspiring writer, the pitcher for her high school softball team, a daughter with deep roots in a community that knew her well. There was nothing in her life to suggest she was in any kind of trouble. Her world was small, and everyone believed it was safe.
On the evening of June 22, 1987, Carrie's father, Gary, asked her to make a short trip to Thomas's Country Store, a familiar market just a few blocks from their home. Before she left, Carrie did something small that investigators would later find significant. She left her own money on her dresser and took the $20 her father gave her instead, a detail that quietly ruled out any suggestion she had planned to go anywhere but straight back home. She walked out of her family's house at around 9:30 in the evening into the quiet Adirondack night. What should have been a 10-minute errand became a 7-year mystery. Before we go further, if you're new to Cold Case Evidence, every week we cover cases exactly like this one. The investigations that stalled, the families that never stopped, the moments that finally broke things open. Subscribe and hit the bell so you're here when the next case drops. Now, back to Ausable Forks and the last known minutes of Carrie Nixon's life. Carrie's final movements that night were tracked through a series of small, ordinary moments, the kind that only matter in retrospect. The store clerk knew her by name. He remembered ringing up her groceries at 9:55 p.m., a bill of just over $3. She paid, picked up her bag, and left. At 10:05 p.m., she was seen for the last time, exchanging a greeting with a neighbor just a short distance from her house. 5 minutes later, at 10:10 p.m., a group of teenage boys walked down that same empty street. In the space between those two moments, in a window of 5 minutes, across a distance of just a few hundred feet, Carrie Nixon vanished.
When Carrie's mother, Kathy, woke at 6 the next morning and found her daughter's bed untouched, her first reaction was pure terror. Calls to friends produced nothing. Police were called, and the nightmare officially began. The initial search was massive. Volunteers from local fire departments and a nearby Air Force base joined law enforcement to cover roughly 50 square miles around the town. They combed fields, searched outbuildings, and walked the banks of the Ausable River. They found nothing. Not a single piece of physical evidence, not a trace. The silence was its own kind of horror. No scene to process, no witness to press, nothing to work with except the last known minutes of a girl's life and a grocery bag that never made it home. Captain Robert Liu of the New York State Police was unequivocal. My theory on this case is Carrie Lynn Nixon was abducted. She's walked off the face of the earth as far as we're concerned.
Over the years that followed, investigators chased down roughly 70 reported sightings of Carrie across the country, conducted more than 1,500 interviews, examined over 200 sets of unidentified remains, searching for a single confirmation that never came. For Gary and Kathy Nixon, life became a cycle of hope and despair that never fully resolved into either. Months after Carrie vanished, an anonymous letter arrived from Michigan claiming she was living in a town in South Carolina. The family had no connections there. The lead made no logical sense, but they traveled nearly 1,000 miles anyway, because when every rational thread has run out, hope doesn't ask for logic. Several residents believed they had seen a girl matching Carrie's description, but the trail went cold. The sightings were never confirmed. Another wave of hope, another crash.
In 1991, the case took a turn that pushed a local tragedy into the national spotlight, centered around a concert video for the musical group New Kids on the Block. 2 years earlier, in June 1989, the band had filmed concert footage in Los Angeles. While watching that footage, Carrie's family saw a girl in the crowd they believed was their missing daughter. Investigators didn't simply take their word for it. They had an enhanced photograph produced from the video and compared it against a recent image of Carrie. The similarities were striking. Hair length, hair color, face shape, and even the precise placement of her piercings. 4 earrings in one ear and 2 in the other, matching what was documented about Carrie down to the last detail. The resemblance was strong enough to ignite a sustained, desperate hope. The story had already aired on Unsolved Mysteries in 1989. Now, band members Jonathan and Jordan Knight made a personal televised appeal. Jonathan asking the girl in the video to come forward. Jordan asking anyone who had seen her at a concert to call police. For months, the family, investigators, and a wave of teenage fans waited. In 1993, the girl in the concert footage was identified as a young woman from California with no connection to the case. The phantom in the crowd was not Carrie. For her parents, this was the extinguishing of the last most public flicker of hope that their daughter was alive somewhere. It locked the darker reality into place, that the answer wasn't across the country. It was somewhere close to home, waiting to be found. For 7 years, the case file gathered dust. Then, in January 1994, the break came from an entirely unexpected direction. Police arrested a 29-year-old carpenter named Robert Anthony Jones for a string of bank robberies. Jones was a native of Ausable Forks. At the time of Carrie's disappearance in 1987, he had been back in his hometown for a family visit, having been living hundreds of miles away in Bar Harbor, Maine. During interrogation for the robberies, information reached authorities that Jones had confessed to abducting and murdering Carrie Lynn Nixon. Faced with the accusations, Jones's attorneys contacted investigators and indicated he had information about the Nixon case. His confession laid out a narrative of calculated, opportunistic violence. He was 23 years old the night it happened. He told police he had seen Carrie at the store while buying beer. Fueled by anger over his wife's infidelity, he decided to take her. He forced her into his car at gunpoint, drove her to his father's remote cabin in the nearby town of Jay, and assaulted her for hours, then attempted to strangle her. When that failed, he shot her. The following morning, he buried her body in a shallow grave in the woods near the cabin. What happened in the years after may be the most disturbing detail of this entire case. In 1990, 3 years after the murder, 4 years before his arrest, Jones moved his family back to the Ausable Forks area. He settled into a home approximately 200 yards from where Carrie's body lay buried in the woods. For years, he lived a short walk from his victim's grave.
while the Nixon family put up flyers, while the town organized searches, while investigators chased sightings across the country, the man responsible was raising his own children just down the road, mowing his lawn, going to work, living the ordinary life of a neighbor. And every summer, he packed a cooler, drove his wife and children to that wooded spot, spread a blanket on the ground, and checked, carefully, quietly, that the earth beneath them hadn't been disturbed. It is one thing to think of a killer as a distant stranger who strikes and vanishes. It is another to picture him unpacking sandwiches for his children a few feet from where he had dumped a 16-year-old girl's body years before. On January 28, 1994, as part of a plea agreement, Robert Jones led state troopers to that wooded area. After 7 years, they found Carrie Lynn Nixon. Buried with her remains were the groceries she had bought that night at Thomas's country store. $3 and change, a bag that had been waiting in the ground for 7 years.
The final chapter of Carrie Nixon's story did not come with a dramatic trial. It came with a confession and a plea agreement that frustrated many of the people who had spent years working the case. To secure the confession and the recovery of Carrie's body, and as part of a deal that also kept Jones's wife from serving prison time for her role in the robberies, Jones was sentenced to 18 years to life for Carrie's murder. This sentence ran concurrently with a 15-year federal sentence for the robberies, meaning he would potentially only serve 3 additional years for the murder itself. Prosecutors were frustrated, but they felt it was the only path that guaranteed both a conviction and, most critically, bringing Carrie home. Jones's wife, whose infidelity had been the stated trigger for the attack, received 2 years probation for her role in the robberies. She and Jones later divorced. In the years since, the community of Ausable Forks has fiercely and consistently opposed Jones's release at every parole hearing. He has been denied multiple times, most recently in 2023. A 2018 appeal of his conviction was rejected by the courts. Richard Sipek was the state police investigator who spent years chasing leads across the country on Carrie's behalf, following dead ends to Michigan, to South Carolina, across hundreds of interviews and 70 reported sightings that all went nowhere. He later said he had come to know Carrie like one of his own daughters. When Carrie's story first aired on Unsolved Mysteries in 1989, it was her younger sister Lori, 15 years old at the time, who portrayed her in the reenactment, a family so inseparable from the search that even the retelling of it couldn't be told without them. The conviction did not end the grief, it only changed its shape. Carrie's brother, John, died in 2007 at the age of 29, the same age Robert Jones had been the night he killed her, after a year-long battle with ALS. He had named his own daughter Carrie Lynn, in honor of the aunt she would never meet. Carrie's father, Gary, passed away in 2011 at the age of 63. In Carrie's memory, her parents established a scholarship fund, ensuring her name would continue to be associated with helping others long after they themselves were gone. There is one more thread to this story that the Nixon family never asked for and never wanted, an eerie coincidence that still unsettles those who know both cases. A young woman named Kathy Hobbs was born just 12 days apart from Carrie Lynn Nixon. On July 23, 1987, exactly 1 month after Carrie was murdered, Kathy Hobbs was killed in Las Vegas. She too had been walking home late at night from a neighborhood store when she was attacked. The cases are entirely unconnected, thousands of miles apart, no shared perpetrator. Investigators on both sides have confirmed there is no link between the 2 men responsible. And yet the parallel remains, an unexplainable echo between 2 girls who never knew each other, born less than 2 weeks apart, killed almost exactly a month apart, both on their way home from buying groceries in the dark, both taken in the last few hundred feet of an ordinary errand.
This is the legacy of Carrie Lynn Nixon's case. It is the story of a community's loss of innocence, a town where parents who once let their children walk to the store without a second thought began waiting by the window, watching the clock, counting the minutes until they heard the door. It is a testament to an investigator who followed hundreds of dead-end leads across the country for 7 years rather than let a file go quiet, who came to know a girl he had never met like one of his own.
It is a testament to a family's love that outlasted 7 years of silence, that traveled 1,000 miles on the strength of an anonymous letter, that watched a stranger's face in a concert video and still dared to hope it was their daughter. And it is a reminder defined entirely by proximity. The few hundred feet Carrie never got to cross, the 5-minute window in which everything changed, the 200 yards between a family's picnic blanket and a grave, the 7-year search that ended just a few miles from where it began. The man who knew exactly where she was the entire time lived close enough to walk there. If Cold Case Evidence brought this story to you, subscribe. New cases every week. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Which moment in this case stopped you cold?
desperate to find answers. Several local residents believed they had seen someone matching her description. For a brief moment, hope returned. Maybe Carrie had survived. Maybe she had somehow started over. Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. But investigators couldn't verify a single claim. The sightings dissolved under scrutiny. The trail disappeared. Once again, the family returned home with nothing except more unanswered questions. It would not be the last time hope would prove heartbreaking. In fact, the most famous false lead in the entire investigation was still waiting just around the corner, and it would capture the attention of millions of people across America. By the early 1990s, Carrie Lynn Nixon's disappearance had become more than a local tragedy. It was a mystery that had quietly spread beyond the borders of Ausable Forks, reaching television screens and newspaper headlines across the country. The case had already appeared on Unsolved Mysteries, exposing Carrie's story to millions of viewers. It was another attempt to generate leads, another hope that someone, somewhere, might recognize her face. No one could have predicted where that hope would lead next. While watching the music video for New Kids on the Block's hit song Hanging Tough, Carrie's family noticed a young woman standing in the crowd during concert footage filmed in Los Angeles. Something about her stopped them cold. The hairstyle, the face, the build, even the earrings. Investigators didn't dismiss the possibility. They carefully enhanced the footage and compared the young woman's appearance with recent photographs of Carrie. The similarities were remarkable. She appeared to have the same distinctive ear piercings, 4 in one ear and 2 in the other. For a family desperate for answers, it felt almost impossible to believe it was anyone else. Suddenly, hope returned with incredible force. The story attracted national attention. Members of New Kids on the Block even participated in televised appeals, asking the unidentified woman to come forward if she happened to see the broadcasts. Fans across America searched concert photographs and shared the story, believing they might help solve one of the country's most heartbreaking disappearances. For months, the possibility lingered. Maybe Carrie had survived. Maybe she had built a new life. Maybe she simply hadn't found a way home. Then the truth arrived. The woman in the video was identified as Lynette Melanchon, a California resident with no connection whatsoever to Carrie Nixon. The resemblance had been extraordinary, but it was only a coincidence. For the Nixon family, another fragile dream collapsed. Each passing year made one possibility